Hey guys, welcome to another edition of the Land Grant Gauntlet's QuickSlant podcast. I'm your host, Trevor Rogers, joined with my good buddy from and colleague from 24/7 Sports and OUinsider.com, Joey Helmer. We're coming to you from Dallas, Texas. It's a big week. It's our favorite weekend of the year. It's OU Texas weekend. Joey, I'm pumped, man.
Hey, there's nothing like it. I mean, it's just, some people, a lot of the media is saying this game has kind of lost some of its luster or whatever term you want to use. It's kind of lost its touch or mark with Texas being a little bit down in Oklahoma coming into this game in the top 10. But you don't have two top 10 teams or two top 25 teams, but I just don't see it that way. I mean, this is just one of those games where every year, if you're Oklahoma, you look to Texas. That's the game. That's a rivalry game. You Texas, you look to Oklahoma.
It's a special. It's always a special thing, especially for folks like myself and Joey, who we've really been around the program for a long time. You even talk to Texas fans, and the true Texas fans, the ones that will be there tomorrow, will tell you that this game means a lot. It means a lot to everyone just because of the event it is. It's not. Sure that the game might not be as good this year, but the Texas State Fair, the pageantry that is Oklahoma, Texas. I mean, it's still your rival. It's still a big deal. Like I don't understand people saying, "Oh, well, it's lost its luster." Sure, may not mean as much in the grand scale of things. It's going to mean a hell of a lot more if OU winds up losing it, because that takes them that might take them out of the college football playoff picture. That'd be a bad loss. So I guess that's as you can see, that's where we're going to begin today. Oklahoma, Texas. We'll begin with Texas actually, and kind of what's going on in the Texas locker room right now. We saw the reports earlier that a player was tweeting during the game last Saturday about transferring from the University of Texas, and then you've got reports of older guys attacking the younger guys, people trying to stay loyal to Mac Brown, people being loyal to Charlie Strong. Joey, I mean, what do you think of all this?
Well, it's interesting because our Horns 247, our sister side down at Texas, reported a lot of this and talked about it, and actually they had a meeting with the entire team after this, and one of the players, a senior leader, when the coaches said, hey, we need to be more serious, we need to, we need to do things right around here. One of these players, a senior leader who is really highly regarded, Horns 247 reported, he stood up and said, hey, we need, accountability on your guys' part too. You guys aren't getting, coaches said, you guys aren't getting the job done. And he said, coaches, you guys aren't getting the job done. So there's back and forth, not only between the players, but we're talking about between the players and the coaches. And so there's a great divide right now in the Texas program. And there's a lot of stuff going on right now that's very concerning. And, we're not just talking about trying to replace a left tackle and trying to figure out who we should piecemeal in to make this offensive line look good. We're talking about a great divide in a locker room, which tears teams apart. We've seen it in so many different, sports before, football, baseball, whatever, where a divide in the locker room, it tears a team apart.
Joey, some people have said this game maybe possibly screams trap game for Oklahoma going into this, because it is a rivalry game. Oklahoma hasn't played well the last 2 years, losing 2 years ago badly to a very mediocre Texas team. But some people, would argue this team that OU is playing on Saturday, tomorrow, isn't nearly as good as those two teams that OU's played in the last couple of years. What are your kind of thoughts on that? I mean, should OU be concerned?
Well, that's my thought about it. Look, OU is concerned. I think they are focused going into this game. I don't, you've been around the team too this week. It seems like there's not a lack of focus in this game. I think this Oklahoma team's going to be ready, but I am of the opinion that, quite honestly, this Texas team is just not very good. I mean, we're talking historically bad Texas team. If we're looking at, what we've seen on the field so far they are really bad. And this is a really good Oklahoma team that I think has a chance to do something pretty special this year. And so I think in terms of the makeup of this team, that's something that really excites me about Oklahoma right now. One of the reasons I like this team so much is that they're pretty matter of fact. I expect them to come into this game and take care of business.
So let's talk about Oklahoma and leading up to this week. Oklahoma has a relatively, I would say actually very impressive win last week against a West Virginia team that came into Norman, entering the top 25 for the first time this season, but they were untested. And then Oklahoma comes out, goes up 24-7 into halftime. West Virginia comes back in that game, but then Oklahoma finishes that game very, very strong. Joey, what's different about this Oklahoma team this year from last year?
Well, I think, the main thing to me about Oklahoma, there were two things that really stood out about that game. West Virginia, I was particularly, before I address Oklahoma, I was particularly impressed in a road atmosphere like that. It was 11 a.m. game, but granted, the crowd was pretty good last weekend at OU.
It was it was loud. It was loud.
It was a good atmosphere, a tough atmosphere to play in. And West Virginia had made some adjustments at halftime in that game, and it was 24-7. It looked like there was a chance, Oklahoma gets the ball to start the second half of that game. They could have ran away with that. But West Virginia hangs into that game and comes back. And so I was really impressed with the fact that they were able to stay in the game. Eventually in the fourth quarter, Oklahoma, they held on. They kind of, withstood that surge from West Virginia, and they pulled away in the fourth quarter. And so a credit to as we get to Oklahoma, to your original question, what's different about this Oklahoma team is that, I'm not so sure they wouldn't have folded last year. If we look at, and again, going back to the Tennessee game, they might have folded, being down 2 scores in that game. I think the makeup of this team is something I've talked about with them being so special. They're so matter of fact that, in 4 games into the season, I'm fairly confident in saying that this team doesn't doubt that they're going to win a game, even if they're down a couple scores. And they have the ability to finish teams off, even like when you saw last week, West Virginia makes the run. It comes back into the game, and Oklahoma withstands that and is able to win that game.
See, if there's one X factor that you have to take into account about what's different about this Oklahoma team and their confidence level and saying we're going to compete no matter what, I'd have to say it's 100% accredited to Baker Mayfield and Lincoln Riley.
Well, that's something that that I didn't quite get to, and I'm glad you bring that up because that's where it comes from. You saw the Tennessee game; he's making plays, he's making guys miss. Oklahoma's offense hasn't done anything in that game going into the fourth quarter, and one play that if this ends up becoming a special season for Oklahoma this year, there's one play that's going to stick out to me, and it was early in the fourth quarter when Baker Mayfield should have been sacked. There were 5 or 6 guys for Tennessee that were in the backfield, and they should have sacked him. And he got out. He made some moves and eluded them and forced a holding penalty on Tennessee, and they ended up on that drive going down, and that's when he hit Samaje Perine for the touchdown pass. And so it's plays like that allow this team to become more confident, and you kind of have the moxie of your signal caller like that saying, hey, I'm going to take some hits, and I'm going to make guys miss, and I'm going to find a way to win us this football game, and I kind of think that's where it all begins.
So tomorrow, what can we expect tomorrow? Give me a couple reasons what Texas is going to have to do or what Oklahoma's going to have to not do in order for Texas to come away with the upset.
There's 2 keys to the game to me. One is containing Gerard Hurd. You have to. Oklahoma's going to try really hard to keep him in the pocket and pressure him and force him to not be able to use his legs and do what mobile quarterbacks have done to Oklahoma in the past. I mean, we've seen so many times in the past where guys, mobile quarterbacks just give Oklahoma fits by running. And so they're going to have to do that. And the other thing is, finally, it was a positive for Oklahoma to be plus in the turnover column the other day. Now, they had 3 turnovers. They forced 5. But Oklahoma is going to have to win the turnover battle. Texas is tied 18th in the country. As bad as they've been so far, they're tied for 18th in the country with a +1 turnover margin per game so far through their first 5 games. So that's important to me that Oklahoma, they're in the bottom half, well in the bottom half in turnover margin. They've got to win that or not lose it in a significant margin.
We saw a lot of penalties, particularly on Oklahoma's part last week. Stoops addressed that in his weekly press conference. Do you think that that's youth, or are we going to see a change this week? Are we going to see anything different? Do you think OU is more clean this week?
Well, I mean, that's the hope, is that you're going to play more clean. I think that's certainly been addressed. I at this point, you can't really say it's a preparation type thing, because it's happened over and over. And in my opinion, it's just going out there and not committing false starts, not holding, not making foolish personal foul penalties that don't need to be made. And I think, you do get some of that in practice, but at some point you got to go out there and make sure you're not doing those, making those mistakes in the game. And I certainly Stoops calling out his team this week and saying, I'm angry with that. That's something we've got to fix if we're going to be an elite team this season. I think there's going to be a focus on that, and I think you probably might see a cleaner football game from Oklahoma tomorrow.
Texas interim athletic director said something this week, and I'm paraphrasing, but it was something along the lines of, barring something drastic, Charlie Strong's job is safe. A lot of people speculate that an interim athletic director is not going to be the one that fires Charlie Strong. But 2 back consecutive poor performances, and one losing to in-state rival TCU, who Texas definitely views should always win that game, considering the type of program they are, and 2, possibly getting blown out by your rival. How stable is Charlie Strong's job mid-season?
Well, I was going to say, he said, unless something drastic happens. Is Oklahoma winning 55-3 in this game? Is that something drastic? Because to me, you have to beat Oklahoma if you're the Texas football coach. If you're, you have to beat Texas if you're the coach at the University of Oklahoma. As we talked about in the beginning of the show, this is a huge rivalry game, and this is a game for both teams every year. There's no Texas A&M for Texas anymore either. This is a game that Texas has to win. And so to me, if Oklahoma comes out tomorrow and absolutely annihilates Texas, to me, that the hot seat, it keeps getting warmer. We're to that point that we'll see. Will they give them another year? I think it's possible, but they're 1-4. I mean, Trevor, let's face it right now. This is a team that's looked terrible so far this season. And if Oklahoma comes out and throttles them tomorrow, that's back-to-back weeks they'll have been throttled. There has to be, I mean, I can't look you in the eye and tell you he's going to have a job next year.
Sure. Let's go ahead. Give me a kind of quick prediction for tomorrow.
Well, I just think, I think Oklahoma's too good, and as I've said several times, Texas just isn't any good. There is that dynamic of, hey, this is a rivalry game, anything can happen. But I just personally don't see it. I think, again, as I've said, Oklahoma's going to come out motivated. They want to win this game, and I think there's a lot of people saying from last year they were lucky to win that game. They could be on a 2-game losing streak again to Texas, and I think Oklahoma's going to come out with fire from that and say, no, we're going to take care of business today, and that's what's going to happen. I think I like Oklahoma to cover tomorrow.
It should be a fun one. Oklahoma getting -17 from Vegas. I think, given that it is a rivalry game, and Texas is a little desperate, I think that line's really, honestly, right about right. So it should be fun. I'm with Joey. I think Oklahoma rolls tomorrow. I don't think that's an unfair pick. So let's go ahead and move on to a little bit of the rest of the Big 12. Kansas State possibly starting a lineman at quarterback this week. Injury problems. little bit of a test. Some people view this as a test for TCU, possibly their first defensive test of the season outside of Minnesota. What do you think happens this weekend for the Wildcats?
If there's any team that can withstand the kind of stuff that they've had to do, it's Bill Snyder and his Kansas State team. But from some sources, some people I've talked to around the league, this is not a good K-State team. They've and TCU it has some issues defensively, but I like TCU to go in and take care of business against a team that just clearly outmatched by some of the things we talked about. Using a guy at quarterback like that. Bill Snyder, I don't see being able to keep this team how he's been able and do the things he's been able to do with his teams in the past.
We've got out on the East Coast, West Virginia, Oklahoma State. Oklahoma State's first real test. Struggled against Texas a couple weeks ago. Struggled against Kansas State last week. Big numbers from Mason Rudolph. West Virginia comes back in that Oklahoma game, but still gets blown out by 20 points. This is an interesting matchup. I don't know where to lean. I want to believe because I saw flashes of what West Virginia was capable of, and I don't know. I know we saw what Mason Rudolph was capable of last week, but I don't know where both of these teams stand. Games in Morgantown. What's going to happen with Oklahoma State and West Virginia this weekend?
Well, I thought West Virginia would win this game by a couple scores until I heard the news the other day that Carl Joseph was out for the season.
That's just
that's a significant loss for West Virginia.
Loss.
I mean, that's just – it'll be interesting to see how they are able to kind of piecemeal things together without Carl Joseph. That's a huge loss. I liked West Virginia by a couple scores in this game. I think I still like them to win this game. It's going to be a rowdy environment. Always is at Morgantown.
It's a good time. That's a good place to be. Big 12 fans, if you haven't been to Morgantown yet, go. It's fantastic. An absolute blast. West Virginia fans are they're a little rowdy, but man, they are top notch. That is a fun bunch to be around.
Yeah, but I just think West Virginia is the better team here, even without Joseph. I'm not sure if they cover the. I think the last line I looked at was down to 6.5 for West Virginia over the ranked Oklahoma State Cowboys on their home field. But I like West Virginia to win this game. I do.
So looking at the Big 12, Oklahoma State, West Virginia, Oklahoma, Baylor, TCU. The conference is Texas Tech maybe, even though Texas Tech, we're starting to see the Texas Tech we kind of expected. They can score points, but kind of tell me, is the Big 12 deeper this year than we thought it would be going into the year?
Well, I think it's fair to say that it's deeper than maybe we thought it was going to be. I think where you look, there's only 2 or 3 teams to me that I think can win the league, and I think it's Baylor, Oklahoma, and TCU, and I really see it being a Baylor-Oklahoma battle at this point. Obviously, that game between those two teams is in Waco, but in terms of the depth of the conference, I think you can look at teams 1 through 7 or 8 and say, probably teams 1 through 7.
No one's safe.
That no one's safe in any given day. Oklahoma goes to Oklahoma State. Who knows? Oklahoma State goes to West Virginia. Baylor goes to West Virginia. Baylor plays at home against West Virginia. But you get my point that anyone plays anyone. I think 1 through 7, anyone could win on any given day. And so that's kind of the way I see the league. But there's only 2 or 3 teams that could win the league, in my opinion.
Joey, you cover the Big 12 extensively with 24/7 Sports. Are we looking? Who are the real contenders for the college football playoff of the Big 12? Does the Big 12 get someone in the college football playoff? And is it a possibility that we might see 2 teams from the Big 12 in the college football playoff?
Well, I think it just all depends on how the season plays out. But I think those three contenders are, again, the three teams that I said I think can win the league: Baylor, Oklahoma, and TCU. And so it comes down to how things kind of shake out between those three. I'm not sure I can necessarily see a scenario where two Big 12 teams get in, unless some things kind of shake out right and Baylor goes undefeated and Oklahoma's only loss is at Baylor. Like, that's probably the only scenario I see where it happens like that, but we'll see.
I cannot believe that we're going into week 6 of the college football season. The Big 12 has been an absolute blast. Joey, this is going to be a fun weekend. OU Texas is always special to me.
Yeah, it's call it like it is. It's the weekend we look most forward to every single season, and so it's going to be no different. No matter what the crowd is, percentage-wise, 60-40 OU, which is kind of what we're hearing. It's not going to be the 50-50, but it's
still closer to 70-30.
And it's a special weekend regardless.
Yeah, it's still a special weekend regardless. College football fans also, if you're in the Dallas area this weekend, come to the fair, experience Oklahoma, Texas. Even if you don't have a pony in the race for this game, it's still one of the best experiences in college football. You get that college bowl atmosphere, really unique experience. You get the fair, corn dogs at 9 a.m., have your a nice cold Shiner Bock. So it should be a lot of fun. I think that's going to do it for us this week. Guys, check out 24/7 Sports and OUinsider.com. Joey does a fantastic job over there. A lot of good stuff covering the Big 12 and then Oklahoma football. And then don't forget to check out, obviously, all the stuff over at the Land Grant Gauntlet. Pretty solid coverage, definitely, of everything that is Big 12. Keep the conversation going. We're going to do this again next week. It's going to be a lot of fun. More big games in the Big 12. The Big 12 race is still, for the most part, wide open. Let's watch some college football. It's going to be fun this weekend. Joey, thank you so much for coming on, and we'll talk to you guys next week.